Alberto and David, if you can join us, not on the stage, but yes, where I can see you. Bienvenidas, bienvenidos. Welcome to the Mexican Consulate. We are very happy to have this conversation. We are delighted to have here David Yetman and Jose Alberto Burques presenting this wonderful book. One of the things that connects us in as Mexican and Americans is the beautiful desert that we share. And also when we see our geography, when we see our biology, we continue to find what unites us, because there are different messages and narratives about what divides us, but I think it is very important to find exactly what unites us. The Consulate of Mexico in Tucson is happy to be a meeting point for different expressions, artistic expressions, scientific expressions, and particularly community expressions. And we feel deeply fortunate to have this wonderful conversation with these wonderful authors that are going to give us their wisdom, their knowledge, which is certainly, along with our own time, the best thing we can share with other people. So let me also recognize the presence of Jeff Bannister. He's director of the Southwest Center at the University of Arizona, and also Mary Robinson from the University of Arizona Press. These institutions, along with the authors in the Consulate of Mexico in Tucson, made this event possible. And you know them, and I don't want to take a lot of your time, but let me talk you a little bit about David Yetman. He's a distinguished outreach faculty and a research social scientist at the Southwest Center of the University of Arizona, where he has worked since 1992. His research specialties include the peoples and ecology of Northwest Mexico and the Southwestern United States. Yetman has a PhD in philosophy and he's author of numerous books and articles, including Sonora, An Intimate Geography, Natural Landmarks of Arizona, and the Saguaro Cactus, A Natural History. Yetman is the former host of the PBS series The Desert Speaks, and current host and co-producer of the PBS Travel Adventure series In the Americas with David Yetman, that we are delighted to watch. And Jose Alberto Burques Montijo, he's a researcher at the Department of Biodiversity Ecology at UNAM, the National University of Mexico. He has researched about genetics and populations ecology with emphasis in the relationship of plants and animals. Also about biogeography, such as distribution of plants around the Western Sierra Madre, the ecology of invasive plants, and the patterns in the use of lands in the Sonoran Desert and tropical forest in the east and south of Sonora. His approach to understand man-made changes in the use and preservation of population is multidisciplinary. Thank you so much. I'm going to give the floor to first to Jeff Bannister, if he wants to address us. 240 characters, as we mentioned. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, so I might go over by a couple characters. I hope that's okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jeff Bannister. I'm the director of the University of Arizona Southwest Center. I'm just going to say really briefly, before I introduce who's already been introduced, my colleague David Yetman and my other colleague, Dr. Alberto Burques, that the Southwest Center has had this University of Arizona Southwest Center series for quite a long time, and it's a labor of love to bring these books to you in working in parallel with the University of Arizona Press. And this book that I believe has been in process for probably 13 to 15 years, I actually had the pleasure of accompanying Yetman and Dr. Burques on a couple of their journeys to photograph in southern Mexico. And so I can tell you that what you're about to hear about is an incredible project that focuses on a beautiful place that has so many parallels with the Sonoran Desert in Tucson. So thanks so much, everybody, for coming. Thanks so much to the Consul in Tucson. And I will turn it over now to Dr. Yetman. Thank you.
Some of you have been asking, or should have been asking yourselves, what are a couple of desert rats like Yetman and Borges doing, writing a book on southern Mexico? We have been wandering around. I've been wandering around. Alberto has been studying around the Sonoran Desert for not as long as I have, because I'm a lot older than he is, and much less distinguished. But the question needs to be really addressed. What is our justification for going 1,000 miles south and spending time there? Well, I'm going to show you. I want to allay all of your doubts about the legitimacy of this book. Not all of them, maybe several of them. First of all, the slide that we have up here now, the beginning slide, this is what Alberto and I are accustomed to seeing. This is a Sonoran Desert. This photograph was taken in Sonoran Desert National Monument south of I-8. And it shows what makes the Sonoran Desert so interesting: the variety of plants, the association of the saguaro cactus with many other plants. It is ingrained in many of you who are here, and you recognize that. But there's more. I want to, that if we can have the next slide, if we go into the Sonoran Desert in the accompanying state of Sonora, near Quino Bay, we find this. These are cardon or sahueso cacti, very, very important cacti in the Sonoran Desert, huge plants, and found only really in the Sonoran Desert. And that's part of what Alberto and I have always built into our consciousness, the sahuesos, these huge cacti. But there's more. Another part of the Sonoran Desert is, next slide, please. And the dog is Bujim. He has been with us. He has been dead for a while, but his spirit lives on among the cardon. Aha. Thank you, Jeff. Jeff does very good slide advancing. Okay. In southern Sonora, we have very dense stands of organ pipe cacti, some of the densest stands of cacti in the world. Alberto and I have spent many, many hours among them, studying them, taking people there, explaining them, and Alberto has done extraordinarily precise research on them, about the importance of them and how they flower and they fruit and how they fit into the ecology of the Sonoran Desert. And then if we go to the next slide to Baja California, you can see why that's part of the Sonoran Desert that interests us. Look at the size of that cardon, a very different vegetation, but still part of the Sonoran Desert. So this should give you a pretty good grasp of what Alberto and I are accustomed to seeing and what we find so fascinating about the Sonoran Desert where we live. We are Sonoran Desert rats. So when we go south about 1,000 miles and we see this, next slide. Now you understand why it might have attracted our attention. This is a location quite close to the junction of the Valle de Tehuacán and the Valle de Cuicatlán. The cacti are known as tetechos, and the numbers there are hard to believe. And the tetecho is one of 18 species of giant cacti found in that area. And then, as if this is not enough, we can go farther and see this, with cacti there larger than the saguaro cactus, one of the largest of all the columnar cacti, and growing with other very strange plants. And I hope you're beginning to develop an understanding of why we found this a place that we had to study. Others have studied it, but Borges and Yetman, when they get together, they do weird stuff. Next slide, please. And there's more. This is a different cactus forest. And look at the density of those. So when Alberto, we saw it for the first time under different circumstances. He bringing us students from UNAM, and I traveling through there in an old Land Rover. But once we saw this, we were hooked. And there's more. Next slide, please. There are cacti that say, come on, we're walking up the hillside, join us. And these cacti there are segregated almost by very small elevation changes. This is a different Cephalocereus Columna Trajani, also called the Viejito. And the next slide, please. And then they get very, very big and they grow in tropical deciduous forest as well as desert. And as you can see, the branching out into much more complex life forms just drew us in there. We could not stay away. Next slide, please. And to add to that, we have sensational archaeological sites. This site is known as the Cerro Quiotepec, which we write about in the book. That particular structure is well over 2,000 years old. Not well known because Mexico has so many charismatic archaeological sites. Next slide. And if we go maybe 100 miles to the northwest, we run into a very different kind of cactus, different habitat, and different people whose land lies is part of this. The cactus forest is part of their land, and those people become most interesting to us. And the next slide, please. And then, how can you not be interested in this? This is a Popolocan site called Tehuacán Viejo. It probably began around 900 AD. But imagine the Sonoran Desert with monumental architecture like this. And so, are you beginning to see the point why we had to write about this? And we were quite impressionable at the time when we began. Next slide, please. We were a couple of helpless lads, traversing the unknown or the known, whatever it was. This photograph probably came from 2005 or 2006. We had not yet decided to write the book, but you can see in the background, good cactus forest. We were already hooked. Something was going to happen. So for almost a decade and a half, we worked on the book. And I must tell you that they are among the most rewarding years of my life, because working with Alberto Borges is like working with no other person. He is a Renaissance man, a man of broad interest, intellect, linguistic ability, and scholarly ability of the first accord. That is my introduction. And now I would like to present my very dear friend, colleague, fellow wanderer, and a desert addict, Sonoran Desert and Tehuacán-Cuicatlán addict, Alberto Borges.
Well, it's difficult to compete with David Yetman of TV fame, wonderful writer, extraordinary friend. Well, this is our book. We spent a long time thinking about it and then writing it. And we really appreciate being here in our house in Tucson, that is the consulate. And we are very grateful for this book presentation, and for, of course, to our universities, the National University of Mexico and the University of Arizona, that were hosting us and paying our salaries and allowing us to have an office and to freely travel wherever we wanted and develop our projects. And there is a David Yetman somewhere in San Juan Raya. Next, please. So I'm a Sonoran, like the consul, Rafael. I was born in Hermosillo. I am a Sonoran dweller. And I love the desert. And Tucson is also my house because it's part of the Sonoran Desert. I feel at home in this beautiful city, as well as I feel at home in the island of San Pedro Martir in the middle of the Gulf of California, where I'm developing field work. And here I am in Tehuacan, an 18-year-old Alberto Burques, going for the first time to the Valley of Tehuacan. And David probably passed by 5 years before this young Alberto Burques was in the Tehuacan Valley. He went across that area in a little motoneta, in a scooter, with his friend Jim Hills. At the time, I took that picture of the Iztaccíhuatl, the highest mountain in Mexico, the Pico de Orizaba, that has these enormous glaciers that went down the slopes and with climate change is slowly disappearing. And I took later on my students to the Valley of Meztitlan, that is another dry area with enormous cacti in Mexico, to do field research and student practices to learn ecology when I was teaching ecology at the National University of Mexico. So my love for the arid lands has stayed with me since I was born, despite the fact that I worked in tropical rainforest for a long time, and also in Europe, in England, in defense of Cambridgeshire, and in other areas in the temperate areas of Europe. My love has been always the arid lands, and particularly the Sonoran Desert. Next. And here we are having breakfast long time ago, thinking on on starting a friendship that has lasted many, many years. I met David more than 30 years ago, and we really had a long friendship, a very close relationship, and I learned a lot from him, and has been always, and I cherish a lot this close friendship. Next. And this produced many joint papers that we did. The result of our treks into nature that combined friendship and academic work, including the recent book of the saguaro cactus, but also work on ejido land and privatization of ejido lands in Mexico, these communal lands of Mexican peasants, as well as thinking about columnar cacti, like the big Cardon sabueso of Sonora and many other things. There is David Yedman, like more than 20 years ago, in a Pachyserius weberii grove in Morelos, Mexico, going to Oaxaca on a trip. And again, David in San Juan Raya. Next. Well, this is an excerpt from the book. In my introduction, during my childhood in the 1960s, lemonades and highballs were always prepared with the famous mineral waters of Tehuacán. The soda water carried a label on which the National University of Mexico's Institute of Geology certified and detailed the chemical content of the reputedly miraculous waters. Little did I know that someday I would visit the Valley of Tehuacán and learn about the vegetation, peoples, and dwindling springs of the valley. Many years later, my journey took me to the heart of the valleys, to places like Purrón, Coxcatlán, and Petlanco, where the earliest Americans roamed and where kings from faraway places came looking for the sacred water in search of a cure in secluded travertine springs. In the numerous treks David and I took through the valleys, we seemed to sense the spirits of earlier explorers. Carl Albert Purpose, the intrepid Dutch-German plant collector, Cassiano Consati, the indefatigable Italian émigré who opened Cuicatlán to the plant sciences, novelist Malcolm Lowry, drinking mezcal in the Lost Railroad town of El Parian, Richard McNish, and many extraordinary researchers who have documented the natural history and human occupation of the valleys. I can imagine all of them sipping the bubbling water from the Ashochopan springs before starting the journey into the valleys. Next. And there they are. This is Elia Bravo Hollis, the utmost Mexican cactologist that grow the monumental work called Las Cactáceas de México, the cacti of Mexico. Cassiano Consati, the botanist. Cyrus Pringle, the great collector. Don Carlos Alberto, Carl Albert Purpose, that was a hermit that traveled all over the world. He made collections in Russia, He made collections in Arizona, in Canada, in Central America, but his most preferred place were the areas around the valleys in the state of Veracruz, Oaxaca, and Puebla, where these three Mexican states went together, their borders. This is where he had a finca where he lived and died. And of course, Scotty McNish, that was the great anthropologist that made the Valley of Tehuacan famous in the anthropological realm. And there is a little Malcolm Lowry under the sedimentary cliffs of Presa Purron in the heart of the valleys. Next. Paraphrasing Aldo Leopold in the Green Lagoons that spoke about the delta of the Colorado River, I would use his almost very same words, saying on the map, the rivers bisected by the imposing mountains were bisected by the opposing mountains, but in fact we could not decide which of the 100 canyons offered the most pleasant and least speedy path to the Oaxacan highlands. So this was our trek. David and I tried just to explore thoroughly the valleys of Tehuacan and Cuicatlán and traverse the valleys going from Tehuacan in the north. We are looking south in this image towards Oaxaca. Oaxaca is in the upper left corner of the image. The Tehuacan is where I am speaking. And there were about three possible ways in which you could go to Oaxaca only. Say the only way to go from the highlands of central Mexico and northern Mexico into Oaxaca was through the Valley of Tehuacan and then Cuicatlán. And you could only go through the original railroad route that went through Valerio Trujano, then the Tomellin, and then up El Parian towards Huitzo and reach the city of Oaxaca, or go through the actual, where the actual old road was going up to Oaxaca through San Jose El Chilar, Dominguillo, and passing next to Nacaltepec, up the highlands of Oaxaca, or going through the Rio de las Vueltas. That was the most traditional way of going up to Oaxaca. And all these we trekked along, learning from the people around and taking pictures and asking and documenting and taking notes to produce this book. Next. And these roads, and this is another excerpt from the book, say the paths and roads of the valleys form part of the arteries in which the prosperity of kingdoms and empires depended, and their armies. Travel between Mexico City and Oaxaca remained arduous and slow until the completion of the railroad between Tehuacan and Oaxaca by a British company in 1893 during the Porfirio Diaz time. A previous attempt sorry, probably a previous attempt by a company headed by retired U.S. President Ulysses Grant to build a railroad connection had failed, but the British company completed construction in just over 3 years. The route followed the Valley of Tehuacan, crossed into La Cañada near Queotepec, and then climbed from La Cañada via Tomellin Canyon and its drainages to emerge into the Valley of Etla near El Huitzo. A difference in height of more than 1,500 meters. That is like like 5,000 feet. The train flourished with federal assistance until the mid-1990s, when the Mexican government eliminated all government funding to its railroads and sold it as part of the neoliberal policies of the time. The highly subsidized construction of the high-speed freeway made travel between Tehuacan and Oaxaca by bus several hours faster than by train. In 2010, torrential rains in the upper basin of Rio Grande and Cañada Chica produced massive flooding downstream. Large sections of the railroad were washed out, and repairs would have amounted to many millions of pesos and would probably have required a change in the alignment in some areas. And by then, the railroad was a private company, no longer owned by the government. So it responded to their shareholders, not to the needs of the local inhabitants. So without public announcement, the trains stopped running. Residents of El Parian, an isolated railway stop in the upper Tomayin Canyon, relate that they, along with a score of travelers en route to Oaxaca, waited for days for the arrival of the train, which had appeared regularly for more than 100 years. It never came. Next. And here is David up in the top of Coatepec, thinking that if the Aztec legions ventured far south in the valley of Tehuacan, they must have wandered at the ruined temples of Los Cues, Tecomavaca, and Teotitlan, and the magnificent and colossal fortress atop the Cerro de Coatepec, much as Roman legions view with wonder the ruins of Etruscan and Greek temples and cities. Some of the soldiers might even have brought home small souvenirs from the remains of exquisite Zapotec ceramics that must have littered the site. And still littered the site. I remember David picking up some things, and I asked him to leave them there. And he did. Next. And of course, one of the things that attracted us most was the columnar cacti, as David remarked. So most columnar cacti are residents of thorn scrub, but they sort out by elevation, often venturing upward into more mysic plant communities. This is most rarely visible in La Cañada, where Mitrocerius fulviceps, an enormous columnar cacti, grows in chaparral above Cephalocerius columna trajani that David showed us, which grows above Neobuxbaunia tetetzo, which grows above Tachyserius weberii. Starting at the Mixtec village of San Pedro Nodon at 1,700 meters, high above the floor of La Cañada, the altitudinal sorting unfolds delightfully as the road descends eastward more than 1,000 meters down into the valley bottom. The succession of columnar cacti evident as one species grades into another. To the north, the Zapotitlan Valley is too high for Pachyserius weberii, which prefers the lower parts of the valley of Tehuacan and La Cañada. Polaschia chende, Polaschia shishipe, and Myrtillocactus chenki grow at the highest elevations, well over 18,000 meters. The later three are found together mostly in the vicinity of Los Reyes Metzontla. So we mixed very academic scientific names with more amenable talk throughout the book. Next. And we find these great friends that kept watching us for the last 21 years since we started photographing it. This was the first picture is in May 2002 when David and I went there to film one of the programs of the Desert Speaks with David. And then we came back in 2012. And then in the many trips, I selected pictures from 2018 and pictures from this month that were taken when we were at the beginning of the month in Reyes Metzontla, David, his team, and I. And you can see how much these two crested tetechas that are very similar to saguaros have grown in the last 20 years. Next. And another excerpt from the book. About 40 kilometers southeast of Cerro Cuta. Cerro Cuta is the hill of the mask, one of the magnificent sites of the Popolocan culture. The most important hydraulic structure known from Mesoamerica rises inconspicuously from a desert dry wash. Compared with the monumental temples and pyramids of Monte Alban or the massive and complex walls and ball court of Cerro Quiotepec, the site does not prepare the visitor for anything unusual. Aside from the imposing landscape of whitish cliffs of the Zapotec Fault in the distance, the ruins of Presa Purron seem downright nondescript until you realize that where you are standing is not a mountain, but is the curtain of the dam. It's an enormous dam that has been cut by the river once it was silted and abandoned 700 of years before our common era. That means almost 3,000 years ago that when the dam was built. So it was amazing to be in this enormous hydraulic project that was made such a long time ago. Next. This picture is taken from the Cueva of Coxcatlan, that was the centerpiece of Richard Stockton McNish, or Scotty McNish work. And the excerpt is from our favorite location in the Cuicatlan and Tehuacán valleys. We could have mentioned the cliffs overlooking Cuicatlan, the view of the lower valleys from Coxcatlan Cave, the interior of the forest of the Techos in the Elia Bravo Botanical Garden, the Cañada Oscura, the dark gorge, of the Rio Chiquila, or the view from atop Cerro Quiotepec. Instead, it is a humble, almost nondescript location near the southern end of the valley of Tehuacan. Cerro Petlanco is a most improbable candidate for international status among natural history sites. The hill, hardly more than 40 meters in height, rises gently from a semi-arid plain. Its topography barely discernible from more than a kilometer away and imperceptible from any but the highest resolution satellite images. Yet, it occupies an important spot in local and regional legendary, has a deep archaeological history, and is a minor celebrity among plant enthusiasts. So we are looking from Cueva Coxcatlan, and Cerro Petlanco is somewhere here. Cerro Verde, an enormous mountain, and this is the Rio Calapa patch that comes from the Mixteca Baja. Next. And here is David looking at Fuchsia purpuseae, that is an endemic, highly restricted species of Bujum from that region. Is closely related to the Bujum tree of Baja California. Then David walking in the Cañada Oscura, and David in his natural habitat. Next. Next. And in the book, you will find this picture somewhere in the book. And one of the questions, David, I will ask is, how many dogs are there? And there is controversy about the number of dogs. This is a picture taken going to Tlacolula, to the market in Tlacolula, in one of her treks, and there are lots of dogs. I reckon there are 9 dogs in there. And they are all very lazily taking a siesta. Next. And you can tell, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 and 6 is not an octopus with 8 legs, or 2 dogs. 7, 8, and 9 that was looking sternly to us and saying, don't take pictures. Next. And this is the road to Petlanco, a sacred place for David and for me. And there is David Yetman here taking the sacred waters of the Petlanco well in one of our mouths in the area. Thank you.
Alberto and I don't take questions, so it was nice having you tonight. Now, any of you have observations or criticisms or questions, why Alberto will be quite happy to deal with them. Yes, in the back.
I'm trying to understand the science behind this species of cacti appearing in this microclimate zone. Do botanists say it was more that this plant species adapted to this more temperate area in terms of temperature, in terms of rain, or did they say that there were man-made causes, like rivers being diverted or too many wells in the area, so that over time, and weather and climate change, so that over time, the weather changed in the area caused the species or subspecies of cacti to appear at this time.
The question is this a natural occurring phenomenon that there are so many columnar cacti, or is there human intervention in this? Let me start, and then I will turn it over to Alberto. One of the reasons that the Valley of Tehuacán is so extraordinary, it has been a very stable climate since the mid-Miocene, 10 to 12 million years. And it has been a semi-arid to semi-arid climate, which has enabled that sort of isolated desert region of southern Mexico. This is a desert in a tropical area, and very stable, and has been a perfect incubation site for the evolution of the species. But let me also defer now to Alberto to talk about that.
Cacti originated in South America, and they are related to the portulacas that are some edible little herbs that grow in subtropical areas. And from there, they started diversifying throughout the lower Andes, the dry areas of South America, and they moved north. It's a relatively recent family in many ways. And they reached North America at some point. And they started diversifying in North America. And they formed two very different groups in North America and South America. And they just keep exchanging species in between the two subcontinents, to the American subcontinents, the North American and South American subcontinent. There are two groups. Biologists call it clades, two clades that are groups. One that developed in South America and is very diverse, has many species in South America, and one in North America, and both are very different, but both evolved columnar forms. And the highest diversity of columnar cacti species is in the Balsas Basin in central Mexico and in the Valley of Tehuacán-Cuicatlán. And from there, cacti moved slowly to many other areas. And the saguaros we have here in Tucson are very closely related to species that are in the Balsas Basin and the Tehuacan valleys. And the 8 species of columnar cacti that are in central and northern Sonora are closely related because they moved from the Balsas Basin and the Valley of Tehuacán, Cuicatlán, and the surrounding regions northwards along these very dry, hot regions. And it's not difficult to envisage that if they move 100 feet every year, you only need a few thousand years for them to reach Tucson. So and we are talking about millions of years of movement. But the richest areas are the Oaxacan, Chiapas, Puebla, all this area in what we call the Sierra Madre del Sur. And this is where all these species evolved. And of course, they differentiated as they were migrating to different parts of Mexico, finally reaching the Southwest in the United States of America.